All right, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. I am so grateful for you being here. And something before I introduce today's guest, something that I was pointed out to me the other day that I do a terrible job of. I actually don't tell you who I am half the time. So I am just so humbled to be your host here. I am Mike Cunningham. I serve you as our National Business Development Manager here at Gill Athletics. Former college coach. Last place was at Mississippi State University. Was a sprints, jumps, and hurdles guy. Not very good because I got out of it, right? So, but really, my passion and calling is here at Gill Athletics is being a podcast host where we uplift and honor coaches from around the country, really just sharing their journeys and their unique journeys and how they got to where they are today, and the work that they put in and the mentors that have poured into them along the way. And I'm super excited about today's guest. So let's hop into it. Help me welcome from New Mexico Highlands University, the head coach, Mr. Bob DeVries. Bob, how are you, sir?
I'm good. You're very good this morning. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, so one of my little quirks is I love to know every mascot of every school. I did not look this up. I think the Highlands, I want to say, is it Cowboys and Cowgirls?
That's it. Cowboys,
Oh,
Cowgirls.
nice. Nailed it.
You got it.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. Growing up, I was a college football and still am a big college football fan. So I always liked the mascots. So I've always zeroed in on who the mascots were of each team. So I know some pretty obscure ones just because I've paid attention to them and have this weird memory of that. So love it. The Cowboys and Cowgirls. Are there a lot of Cowboys and Cowgirls in New Mexico? I'm not terribly familiar with New Mexico.
This area is a big ranching area. So yeah, back in the day, although there have been movements to try to change it over the years, but it's stuck.
And where in New Mexico? I know Albuquerque,
Yeah.
right? We go there for USA's and NCAA's. Where's
Sure.
Highlands at?
So we're about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes north east of Albuquerque towards the Colorado state line.
Oh, okay.
Kind of right where the mountains and the plains meet. If you look west from town, you see mountains. If you look east from town, you see the plains.
Oh, okay. So if you're up by Colorado, how far are you from Pueblo?
3 hours.
Yeah, okay. Because we'll be there not too soon.
We'll be there for nationals in a couple 3 weeks or so.
Yeah. In fact, when you're listening to this, we might actually be there right now. I'm not sure when this actually drops.
Yeah.
The podcast time world, when we record and when it actually drops. So I have no idea. Where am I at right now? I have no idea.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to see you in Pueblo up there as well. Well, Bob, let's hop into our Wayback Machine here. Let's take a look at your origin story, if you will. Mm-hmm. Where does, assuming that you were an athlete, at some point, coaching switched for you from something that was done to you, Bob, go lift this, go run this, throw this, whatnot, to oh, wait a minute, this could actually be a career for me. Where does coaching begin for you?
So I'm gonna go way back.
Okay.
Right? All right. So I was a high school distance runner.
Okay.
I was coached by a pure football offensive line coach, and who was not a really nice guy and didn't know anything about distance running. And basically every day he would say, "Hey, you guys go off and run that trail in the woods." And I had a guy who had graduated a couple years before me, and I knew his younger brother. He went off and ran at college, a nearby college. I was in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
I actually graduated high school from a school that doesn't exist anymore in Wisconsin. But this guy had gone off to run at the University of Wisconsin Parkside, and one day his younger brother brought me a magazine, and it was called Runner's World.
Nice.
And he said, "Hey, Joe sent this for you." And Joe and I had never been very close, but he did give me a couple pointers once when I was like a freshman. And he said, "Joe sent this for you. I don't know what it is." And I looked at it and I said, "Wait a minute. There's a magazine all about running." And at that time, not to disparage Runner's World, but back then they actually had articles about training and that sort of thing more than, I don't know. I stopped reading Runner's World a while ago, but back then it was like, holy cow. I started reading all these things. And one day I went in and Joe sent me a couple other things. And one day I went into the head coach's office and I said, we're not doing a lot of things that I think we could be doing to help us get better.
You went into the football, the offensive lineman / track
Yeah,
coaches and said,
track
hey,
coach.
this
Hey,
magazine tells me.
exactly. And I said, look at this. And I was excited, right? I was excited. I was dumb. I was excited. I was like, look at this. There's these things called intervals, and there's these things called, and fartlek, and and I put him on his it, and I fully expected him to say, yeah, I'll look at it naively,
Right.
and,
Okay.
and he looked at me, and I could still see his face. He looked up at me, and he had these wire rim glasses, and he kind of looks over the glasses, and he says, DeVries, you're so damn smart. You coach the distance runners.
No.
Yeah, I was a junior in high school, and I'm sure he expected me to say, well, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
But rather than that, I gathered up the 2 or 3 magazines that I had there and said, okay, I'll start on Monday. And I started coaching distance runners as a junior in high school. And essentially coached our distance squad through those last 2 years of high school. Coached myself and coached another group. And then so then in my senior yearbook, a guy who I was a distance runner, but we weren't very good. So I ran the slowest leg on the 4x4 as well. And one of the guys who was on our 4x4, he wrote in my senior yearbook, Bob, you're going to make a great coach someday. And
Wow.
and that always stuck with me. And that guy, Jeff Daniels, I hadn't seen him for 40 plus years. I graduated in 76. I hadn't seen him in person until last fall. He looked me up. He was on his way to his winter place in Arizona, and we had dinner. And I reminded him of that.
Yeah. Did he remember that? Yeah.
He didn't remember writing that,
Right.
but he knew I had become a coach,
Wow.
and so that stuck with me. And
Yeah.
um, I did have a good high school cross country coach. Didn't know a lot about training, but he was just a great person. His name was Mike Broderick, and he used to have us over his house. He'd take us canoeing in the summers up to Canada, and I just began to think that this was a lifestyle that and just something that I enjoyed being around, and also I like my summers off, although I don't we don't
Yeah.
get summers
I
off
was
too
gonna say,
much anymore.
how'd that work out for you?
Yeah,
Right. Well,
you know,
little to unpack there, Bob. It's interesting. Go back to, I think you said his name was Joe that sent you the magazine. It didn't
yeah.
sound like you two were necessarily like best friends or anything. Like, what do you think? And do you have contact with him? What do you think was the reason why he sent that to you? Maybe not. He could have sent
Well,
that to another teammate. He could have not sent
I,
it at
yeah,
all.
I do know why he sent it to me. He ran at the University of Wisconsin Parkside,
Right.
and a friend of my family was the AD at Wisconsin Parkside. He hired me in the summer when I was like a freshman, sophomore. And the course that used to be, it's now the Wayne Donnell National Cross Country course. They used to hold NAIA nationals there all the time.
Right.
I actually worked in the summers clearing, and I tell people I built that course. It wasn't me, of course. It was
Right.
it was a whole crew, but so so I went out to a cross country. They had a home cross country meet, and I went out, and I think I was probably standing about mile 3 of a 5 mile race, or maybe it was a 6 mile. And Joe was running for the University of Wisconsin Parkside, and another coach, high school coach, had actually taken me to the race. And I just basically said, hey, let's go, Joe. And
Huh.
he came to me after the race, and he goes, why are you here? And and I said, well, I knew you were going to be running, and I came to cheer you on. And he was a very, very quiet guy, and he just kind of said thank you and walked away. And we didn't have a lot of interaction. I can remember when I was a freshman and I got beat. I ran like a 5:05 mile, and I tried to outkick a guy, and he came up to me at the end of that race, and he said you did everything right up until you got beat. and and so I guess he just thought, okay, there's a guy that maybe has an understanding of running or something.
Yeah.
And and the fact that I showed up to watch him run.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's what happened there, you
That's
know.
that's cool. You know, we need people in our lives like that, that call it the random acts of kindness or whatever, because he easily could have
Right.
not done that, and it had an impact on you. What I'm
Sure.
curious about, Bob, that's kind of a I share a similar story to that. Not I shouldn't say that. Nowhere close to what you just said. But what it made me think of, and I know other coaches have this this scenario, that this experience as well. So you were being, you know, go out into the woods, go run this trail. That was your training, right? Very similar.
Sure.
My high school coach, we literally, people don't believe this, but this is the dead truth. Up until my senior, we got all new coaches my senior year, but all through high school, our track practices were, we do our 2 laps, you know, warm up, you know, pretty typical. We do our static stretching, pretty typical back then, and then we would run our events and go home. That was it. So literally
Yeah.
every day we'd run the events like they were in a meet. So we'd start with the 4x8. I mean, all the sprinters would sit there and watch us as we ran the 4x8. And then I think maybe the 100-meter was next. So we'd watch the 100-meter guys do the 100-meter, and then, you know, whatever, all the way down to the 4x4 every day, Monday through Friday,
Every
unless
day. Yeah.
every
Yeah.
day, every day.
Yeah.
And
There
so,
wasn't a lot of science behind it.
well, and what I'm curious about is, so that's how I was coached. And when I first started coaching, I didn't do it to that extreme, but I was a terrible coach. I did similar-esque things. And as I started going to clinics and started learning about coaching, it was like, you know, the proverbial, you know, skin pulling away from I could start seeing. I'm curious for you, Bob, when you're the go out and do the trail guy from coach, and you start reading this Runner's World magazine, and we don't talk X's and O's necessarily, so I'm not concerned about that, but you started learning about intervals and fartleks, things like that. Was it like an aha moment of like, oh my goodness, like, wait, there's actually training, not just running. There's an
Yes.
actual system here.
Yes. That was, I mean, it was, yes, it was, I mean, I had a little closet in my bedroom where I had all kinds of books, and I would sit in there for hours and just
Oh,
look at
wow.
stuff. And I still have notebooks from way
Wow.
back then where I wrote down stuff. And yeah, I just I I I tell my kids now, you know, you really need to be a student of your sport
Mhm.
and or a student of your event. And I guess that goes back to what I did. You know,
Right.
I became a student of the events and well, distance running
Mhm.
very early on, very early on.
So before we move on past high school, I am curious. So this was junior year. You went to coach, and you know,
Yes.
coach was like, "All right, you coach them, DeVries."
Yep. Yep.
How did that go? And what I mean by that is, less how did the kids get better? I assume they did, just because you started putting, you know, actually any kind of
Yeah.
training, it feels like it would have been better. How did your relationship with coach go those last 2 years? Did coach feel threatened, or was he
He,
welcoming? How did that go?
you know, he didn't care.
Oh, that's the worst
Honestly,
answer.
I, oh, honestly, I mean, we were not a very good track team.
Sure.
I still have a picture somewhere. We won our because in Wisconsin you used to have a dual meet on Tuesday and an invitational on Saturday,
Amen. Yep.
and we won our first dual meet that we had won in like 4 or 5 years. And I have a picture of us all piled in the back of my friend's Chevy pickup heading to Dairy Queen to go celebrate because we beat, like, you know, some small, I think it was St. Mary's Catholic that had fewer kids than us. And
Right.
we were so dying excited. But, you know, our athletes did get, we got better. You know, I
Good.
got better. I got to the point where I thought I might even get a college scholarship. I ended up getting a college scholarship. Um, and, you know, and I was helped a lot by the cross country coach too, in terms of,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, Mike Broderick, who actually my son's middle name is Broderick, uh, named after him.
Wow.
And
Dude.
so yeah, no, I mean, but as far as the track coach, he was just like, I think he was happy he didn't have to worry about the distance.
Yeah, yeah, he got happy, not because they were getting better. It's like, okay, good. I don't have to give you the
Uh,
hand wave and go to the trails. You get to just go
uh,
do your own thing.
yeah,
Well,
and yeah, so
tell me,
that's really how it started.
well, tell me more about Broderick.
Uh-huh.
You named your son after. I mean, that's an
Yeah,
impact there. That to me is that's proof positive of the impact coaches make on young people. He made some impact
absolutely.
on you that you named a child's name after him. Tell me more about Broderick and his
So
impact with you.
yeah, so I played football my freshman and sophomore years. I didn't run cross country.
Right.
And no, I take that back. I started running cross my sophomore year. But I was a small guy, I'm 6 foot, but I was skinny, and they wanted me to play. We had this offensive that it was involved pulling guards, and I was kind of quick, so and I hated it. And
You were a
so
guard.
yeah,
Oh.
I was I was an offensive guard on a offense that pulled and did a lot of sweeps and that.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I didn't enjoy it. And so I started running cross country my sophomore year, and I wasn't very good, but Mike Broderick, he created this family atmosphere, that's I think fairly typical among cross country teams in high school. And we did a lot of things together, and he talked about summer training, and you can't take off,
Oh,
and
wow.
and he would have us over, and his wife would cook out in the backyard. Um, just a lot of things. He put together these canoe trips to Canada,
Yeah. Wow.
and so we bonded a lot, and that was really, uh, I mean, I had a good mom, good dad, but
Mm-hmm.
Mike really became a father figure to me, and I just thought I modeling my lifestyle after that seemed
Right.
like a good thing.
That's
Yeah.
really cool, man. I love that example you have in front of you there with him. What was his role during track season though? Why wasn't he coaching distance runners?
Uh, they did not see eye to eye at all.
Ah, okay.
There was a lot of. I think a lot of them were doing it for the small stipend or whatever,
Sure.
and the football coach was really doing it to get his football guys in shape
Right.
for summer, and
Yeah.
trying to have a better football season.
Yeah.
So they didn't include him
Got
in
it.
that. So cross country, he was a drafting teacher. He had a small little office and classroom kind of off the gym, and it was like a little private world, of these nerdy distance runners. And I would walk by his. I never took drafting. I hated it.
Well, I was about to say, you just said something that maybe 90% of our listeners are like, drafting class. Tell us what drafting
Oh,
class is. Yeah.
like architectural drawing, and back then it was called drafting.
Yeah. And it was a pretty popular class back then.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's not an uncommon thing to hear that. But I think 90% of the people are like, what in the world are you talking about?
What is
We
drafting?
never did that. Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Bob, you go to college, you earn a
Right.
scholarship to college. I mean, that's pretty fantastic. That's a heck of a story of runner's world for crying out loud, and for Joe, honestly, as well. What
Yeah,
when you went to school, what did you major in? What did you think at that point? Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna become a
yeah. So I left. I left. I mean, I was decent. I was like a 10 flat 2 miler, but I
Mhm.
thought I was going to go to the University of Arizona, and
Okay.
and I was naive in that regard. I had a couple small offers in Wisconsin, but I I wanted to get out of town, right?
Mhm.
And so literally the day after I graduated, I moved to Arizona. I
Wow.
worked on a dairy farm, and ran. You had to run at 5 in the morning. It was so darn hot, and I thought I was. So I'm going to get off track a little bit. I'll tell you a story. So I thought I was going to go to the University of Arizona. I really did. I said I'm just going to walk on. They don't know who I am, but I'm just going to walk on at the University of Arizona. And my friend, whose family had moved their dairy farm down to Arizona and invited me to come down and work for the summer, I went down there, and he was a little bit of a runner, 800 guy. And he said, "Hey, they have these summer track meets. Let's go run." And this was in Tucson, so it was end of June or early July. We show up at a track, uh, and we're gonna run the mile. And I look over, and there's these guys, and I recognize one of them as Tom Hunt, who had just broken 4 minutes for the mile, and was a high school guy out of San Diego who was going to go run at the University of Arizona. And I look, and there's a couple of they turn out to be Scandinavian guys, and I
In your
tell
heat.
in my yeah, it was only one heat. There was about
Oh.
10 of us. There was about 10 of us in this open track meet, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna break 4:30, and these guys are thinking we're gonna run 5 miles at 4:30. And so after the race, which we got creamed, I told Ted, I said, Ted, I don't think I'm going to be running at the University of Arizona. It turned out that they had brought all these guys in early, Tom Hunt, a couple of other guys. They had some Scandinavian guys. And I realized
Maybe I
quickly
should rethink this.
I was out of my league. And so I began to look for a smaller school. And one of my jobs on the dairy farm, which had just moved down, they had just moved like lock, stock, and barrel to Arizona, was to go back and occasionally pick up cows or bulls. And one time I drove through New Mexico because I like to take different routes. And there was a sign that said New Mexico Highlands University. And I looked and I could see the mountains and it was green and it was not 100 degrees. And I was driving a fifth wheel trailer with some Holstein bulls in the back. And I literally took a tour through the campus with driving this truck, pulling cows. And I said, I like this place.
No
And
way.
I wrote a letter to the coach. I never heard back from him because we didn't have internet back then, right? I couldn't email him.
Right.
So then the next time I took a trip, I stopped. I found out who he was. I found out he was the manager of the swimming pool. And I went in and I said, hey, I'm Bob DeVries. I wrote you a letter a month or so ago. And he goes, oh, yeah. I remember. He goes, yeah, I think I might like to come to school here. And he goes, hang on. And he picks up the phone and he goes, hey, Robert, I got somebody I want you to come and run with. And he goes, can you, so he tells me, wait around. So now I had done a little research and I knew that Highlands had an All-American in cross country NAI the year before named Robert Yata. And so I'm like, Robert, is it him? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be running with some. So Robert Yata shows up at the swimming pool and he says, let's go run. And I look down and he's wearing green Chuck Taylor high top basketball shoes. Now running, I was wearing like Adidas SL 76s or something. Running shoes were just getting popular.
Right.
But I had running shoes. And I looked at him, I said, are you going to change shoes? And he says, no, I train in these all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy was an All-American in cross country and he trains in Chuck Taylor high tops. This is crazy. So we go for a run, about 5 miles, come back, and he didn't push me.
I was going to say, did he try to crush you? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
No, he didn't push me. It was pretty relaxed. And go back into the pool, and George was the coach, and he tells Robert, well, what do you think? And Robert goes, yeah, I think we can use him.
And this is like some kind of movie. This does not happen in real life.
No, so this is all very, very true. So George tells me, and back then they were on quarters, so we started after Labor Day, and he tells me, if you can be here the day after Labor Day, in shape, I will give you in-state tuition scholarship.
Wow.
And I said, I'll be here. I went back to Arizona, gave my 2 weeks notice, went back to Wisconsin, convinced a couple of friends to come to school with me, and
wow.
And essentially I've been in New Mexico ever since.
Wow, Bob. Dude.
So yeah, that's how I ended up at New Mexico Highlands.
I love I'm trying to think how to put this. I believe in general, we put the past on a pedestal and the future is like terrible. Like everything's going to destroy us, right? Radio was going to destroy us. TV was going to destroy us. Internet was going to destroy the world. Now cell phones and social media, etc. So I'm real cautious sometimes of like putting the past stories like this of like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Like, I wish it could be like that today. But this story was amazing, Bob. I mean, the sheer serendipity of a lot of that, of just, you could have taken a different route. You could have taken the same route every time and never gone through where Highlands was. Right. You could have said, New Mexico Highlands, I've never even heard of that, and kept driving. You could have given up after you wrote a letter and didn't hear anything back. I mean, this is amazing.
A lot of different circumstances that kind of came into play there. And when I did get to Highlands, we went through a few coaches, and Um, so you got time? You got time for another story?
Oh, I love that's what we did it for. This is why we have the podcast, for stories, my
All right,
friend.
all right. So after my freshman year, George was my coach, and then he got fired, and they brought in another coach who didn't really want to be a coach, and then he went off and coached high school, and so the AD at the time, bless his heart, I love the man. He passed away a few years ago. He's in our Hall of Fame, Jim Marshall. I'm going to tell this story, but I have nothing but utmost respect for Jim Marshall and love for him and his family. But Jim Marshall said, we're going to drop cross country. And I was like, I went in and said, why? And he goes, I can't find anybody to coach it.
Don't say it.
I said, I'll coach it. He
No.
says, I can't. He says, I cannot let you coach. You are a student. You cannot coach. I said, how about if I find a coach? And he goes, it has to be a faculty member. And I've asked everybody in the faculty, you're not going to find a coach.
Right.
And I said, can I try? And he goes, okay. So I had one of my friends who I convinced to come to Highlands with me was a wrestler. And I had been at a wrestling meet. And I sat behind a guy that I knew was on the faculty. And I remembered hearing him say, I'd like to coach someday. Well, I didn't remember exactly who he was, but I remembered his face. And back then, the business, and I was an English journalism major, history major, humanities kind of. Anyway, I walked by this office and I saw the guy. His name was Ron Maestas. He was a business professor. And I simply walked into his office and said, Dr. Maestas, I was at a wrestling meet one time when I heard you say you wanted to coach. How would you like to coach cross country? And he said, well, I was really talking about wrestling.
Right.
And Ron was a big old guy, kind of rotund. He smoked. As a matter of fact, he leaned back in his chair and he grabbed a cigarette. I still see it. And he was smoking a cigarette and he said, cross country, huh? He goes, so what do you guys do? You go out and run 3 or 4 miles every day? And he takes a big drag on his cigarette. And I tell him, something like that. And he goes, huh? And he's like thinking about it. And he's a smart guy. He had written books, in the early day of the internet, he wrote like Microsoft for Dummies. And,
Oh, wow.
he was a really brilliant guy. He is a brilliant guy. I mean, he's still with us. But I told him, I've got a lot of books and I can teach you everything about the training and stuff. But I need a faculty member who can do the paperwork and who will be the coach. And he said, let me talk it over with my wife. And like 2 days later, he told me, yeah, I'll do it. And so I kind of taught him about intervals and fartlek and repetitions and tempo and LT, max VO2 and we had a very good relationship. We worked together. As a matter of fact, our second year I was assistant, we were number 8 in the nation in NAIA. And he went on to be he's in the Hall of Fame for our conference.
Oh, wow.
He went on to be a very successful coach. And then he stayed coaching for about 10 years and I went off and coached high school. And then when he retired, Highlands went through a series of coaches, like seriously 4 coaches in 3 years before I came back and said I would do it.
So you were kind of coaching by proxy. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that, his success was because of me, but I got him started.
So when you were going in and you're studying humanities, was the idea to become a high school teacher and coach, or what was the actual career path at that point?
Yeah, when I first started, I thought college, like a lot of people, you start one thing, you change. I thought I was going to be an exercise physiologist. I thought I was going to lean toward the kind of the science of training and that sort of stuff. But to be honest, I mean, I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I got into like organic chem or something like that. And it was really hard.
Yeah.
And I had a history professor by the name of Mike Olson, and we used to take the exams in those little blue books, that you write in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was passing back our exams, and he looked at me and he goes, DeVries, what's your major? And I said, chemistry. And he goes, you should be a history major. And I agreed with him. And at that point, yeah. So at that point, yeah, and really it was probably that semester that I said, I coach, have my summers off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
I think they said organic chemistry has turned many, many pre-med majors into humanities and liberal arts and such.
Well,
Yeah.
it did me. It did me.
So you go through the rest of college. You mentioned you went to go then coach high school. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I go. Oh my gosh, this is going to be another story. You're going to say, like, what the heck?
No, you keep pouring it on, Bob. This is amazing.
So I have a job. I become the sports information director at Highlands. The sports information director quits. I had been writing for the office, and they just elevated me basically. Right. So I had a job lined up for the fall. I was going to be the full-time SID, maybe work on my master's. And a friend of mine gets a job interview at a tiny school. Magdalena High School is part Native American boarding school, part public school. And he says, hey, will you go down there with me for an interview? And, just to keep him company. So we go down and we drive into town, and there's one paved road in town. It's all dirt roads. It's got like 500 people. We go in, and he goes in for the interview with Mr. Duggins. His name was Lyndall Duggins. And he comes out of the interview, and I'm still just hanging out. I'm sitting on the front porch or front steps of the school waiting for Mark Cassidy, my buddy, to come out. And Duggins, the principal, looks at me and he goes, what's your story? I say, well, and he says, come in here. And I go, no, I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for a job. And he goes, get in here. And I go, okay. So he basically interviews me for a teaching job. Well, I know we only got 2 hours or 1 hour or whatever we got. So by the end of the next 20 minutes, both Mark and I have teaching offers. And
I'm speechless. I mean, these are just things that don't happen today.
Right. And so, so we go, then we look around, we find a place to rent. And essentially we both go to teach and live together there in Magdalena. I coached, I coached everything, right? I actually was 6-man football coach of the year a couple of times. We didn't have cross. I started cross country. I started the cross country team. When I started track, I said I'm going to coach track. My first year, I would take the entire boys and girls track team and a manager in one of those little old station wagons. So we had about 6-8 people. By the end of my career there, we were pretty successful and winning district championships and state, individual state championships and stuff like that. So, I mean, we were fairly successful, and it was really that was a great experience because I had to coach every event by myself. I had to learn, I had to learn about coaching, and there was nobody there that knew anything about track. Right. And so, but
my favorite thing to do is ask, like when I'm at a high school clinic, like, oh, what do you coach? And invariably, because they're high school teachers, a lot of them will say, yeah, I'm a high school coach. I coach everything, a little bit of everything. How did you, coming from a distance background and being a student of the sport, sitting in that closet, just reading and learning, how did you start picking up how to coach the throws and the jumps and the sprinters and hurdlers?
There's 2 books that I still have today. One is I think it's the original track and field omni book, maybe. Ken Doherty, maybe.
Yep.
So, and then there was this guy from Florida, and I don't remember where I found the book. It was like organizing high school track and field or drills. Ken Brahman. that name just popped in my head. Ken or Kevin Brahman. He was a high school coach in Florida, and
I guarantee you it's Ken Brahman, who has been on manager of many USA teams, coaches, and his son, good friend of mine, Lance Brahman. Lance Brahman coaches for Adidas, coaches the Lyles brothers, and Coach
I didn't
Tyson.
realize.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. When you said Ken Brahman in Florida, I was like, that's Ken. Yeah, legend, great guy, phenomenal guy. And Lance is an amazing guy. Yeah.
He had this little blue book. He had this little blue book. I mean, it was maybe only 100 pages, but it had all these organizational tips, like if you were by yourself, and it had drills, and I just absorbed that, and poured over it and applied those things, and those were my first two foundational technique books. Then I went to a clinic, a USA, back then it was USATF. TAC. TAC. That's what it was. It was the TAC level 1 school.
Yeah.
And I still have the little spiral bound handbook with all the line drawings.
Yeah.
And
that would have been around the origin of level 1s.
Yep.
Like this would have been the first few years.
It would have been, it would have been like 81 or 82.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I never throw anything away. So I still have all the books and the clinic notes and all that stuff from when I went to that first TAC school.
Yeah.
And then I found out about that they actually had clinics for coaching. And so my first clinic I went to here in New Mexico, I remember two of the coaches that were really big influences on me. Curtis Williams was the coach at Gallup, would go on to win many state championships in cross country. And then one of the Henry brothers.
Yeah.
So who, not Pat, Pat's brother.
Like Matt
was coaching high school at the time. And these guys, they were really nice to me. I asked a lot of questions, and they were very nice to me. And, I'm still friends with those guys today.
Was floored when I started going to the New Mexico State Track Clinic, and then we'd be in Albuquerque many years for USAs and then NCAAs. New Mexico is not a very populated state, as you mentioned, a lot of ranch and things like that. But first of all, the people that have come out of New Mexico, not just athletes. I mean, there's been amazing, I think about, what's my decathletes, like Curtis Beach, guys like him, many others, but the coaches that have come out of New Mexico, you mentioned the Henrys, so Pat Henry, great coach at Texas A&M, former LSU, his brothers, Matt, and what was his other brother's name? I almost want to say Kurt, but I don't think it's Kurt.
No, Kurt's his son.
That's right.
Then, I met the other Henry was at UNM for a long time with the 400 runners.
Yeah,
really successful.
Right. I met his nephew. Was at his turquoise school. I went out there to visit practice, and they had 200 kids on the team.
Oh yeah, Cleveland High School.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Who else is from there? Mario Satania, I believe, is from New Mexico.
Mario. He's at Texas now.
Yeah, and great people like Spencer Sealshot. I mean, just New Mexico, for not being, there's no one that lives in New Mexico, and there are tons of amazing track history that comes out of that state. It's amazing.
There really is. There really is tradition and distance, and I mean, just a lot of good, really solid coaches, good people have come out of here, and I've been fortunate to know a few of them. I'm not a big social guy, and I'm not a guy that constantly keeps in touch with people, but I've been privileged to know a few of those, and they had influence on me when I was young, and not so much, like you talk about, the training and the X's and O's, just the way you behave, right? The way you behave, how you carry yourself, the relationships you build, and so that's what I learned from those gentlemen.
I love it. Yeah, well, it's great role models to have. That's for sure. So how long were you at this school, and what happened next?
I was there for 10 years.
Yeah.
I was there for 10 years. Yeah. And so I come back to Las Vegas. I just decided it was time. ready to not. I wasn't gonna go coach college. I came back to Las Vegas because I missed being able to go out and trout fish wherever any day I want to. I missed the mountains
Sure.
and the fishing and so I thought I'll go back and I went in. Uh, I knew they had a track job opening at the local high school, and I had coached there when I was in college. Just assistant. I coached a couple state champs when I was there, and I went in and Larry Archuleta was the athletic director, and he brought me in. I said, I wanted to coach track, and he goes, "Yeah, I need a soccer coach." I said, "I don't know anything about soccer, but I'll coach track." He goes, "Yeah, I need a soccer coach." I said, "No, track." And he's looking down at paper and he's writing. And he goes, "I need a soccer coach." And I go, "I'll coach soccer if I can coach track." And he goes, "You're hired." And so, uh, and he tells me, "Oh, don't worry about it. I've got a guy from Highlands that knows a lot about soccer. I just need a guy on the faculty because I got a history teaching job
Mm.
at the middle school." And he goes, "I got a guy that knows all about soccer, and he'll do that part of it." And so 3 or 4 days into practice, he comes in. He's got this folder, and it's got anyway. He tells me, I think you got a pretty good handle on this. And he goes off and never really saw him again. And
No
so I took over.
way.
I took over the soccer team, and we were just a JV program. It was the very first year they had soccer. But I remember going and telling the guys, and it was co-ed. It was a co-ed
Huh.
JV team, and then the next year they were going to start a full-blown program. But I told them I don't know anything about soccer, but we're going to be really well conditioned. And so so I coached the high school girls track team for a bit, but Highlands had just like I alluded to earlier. Highlands had 4 cross-country coaches
Mhm.
in like 3 years,
All right.
and the coach they had just hired. Um, this was August of '91, or August of '92. That they had just hired a coach. He didn't even show up. They hired him. Practice started. He didn't show up.
Wow.
Somebody found out he got an AD job somewhere else in New Mexico, and he wasn't coming. So, so I go in to the office of the athletic director of the time, guy by the name of Robert Evers, was an athletic trainer, great guy, Civil War history buff. And I tell Rob, he goes, "I will coach the cross country team for free." And he goes, "Well, how are you going to do that? You teach." And I said, "Well, we'll practice after I teach." And he goes, "I can't let you do that." And I go, "No, really, it'll work. I'll make it work. I'll get up early in the morning. We'll have morning practice. I'll teach I'll coach after 3:30. That's fine." And he goes, "No, I can't let you do that." And I go, "You can't let me do what?" He goes, "I can't let you do it for free."
Hmm.
And he goes, "I'll give you $1,500."
Wow.
And I said, "I'll do it."
Wow. So
And
you're
so
back at your alma mater now.
yep. So I'm coaching
Wow.
cross country and coaching and teaching middle school history and coaching the girls track team at the high school,
Yeah.
all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty busy.
yeah. And I did that for quite a while. I mean, we did not have track and field until 2006.
Oh, is that
So
right?
yeah.
Oh,
So for
wow.
all those years, I coached cross country in the afternoons,
Huh.
and then I coached high school track as well.
What, while
And then
teaching at the middle school this whole time?
while teaching at the middle school. Yep. And
Until,
then
yeah, go ahead.
until 2006. Then in 2006 they added track, women's track, as kind of they did it half-heartedly, but it was okay with me because I couldn't commit full time to it.
Hmm.
So then in 2008 the AD called me in and he goes, "What would you think about being full time track coach and track and cross country?" And I looked at him and said, well, I'd be interested, but I know you can't pay me
Mm-hmm.
what I would need to get paid to quit teaching. And he goes, what would you need? And I told him exactly what I needed. And he said, I'll get the contract. I went home and I told my wife, damn it, I should have asked for 10,000 more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just talked myself into a job. I probably could have made more, right?
But we don't. I don't know that. I don't think there's too many track and field cross country coaches out there that are getting rich or doing it for the money,
Right,
right?
right.
It's really, we love the sport and we love the connections, and so yeah. So in 2008, became full time at Highlands. Taught a few classes in the humanities and coached. So that's what I've been doing ever since.
So during this time before 0608, before full time came along, you're teaching
Yeah.
middle school, coaching the girls track team, and then cross country for Highlands for quite a while. At any point, did you ever have the desire of like, you know what, I need to just be a full-time teacher, or maybe I need to go to another college and become a full-time track and cross country at all? Or was it just, I mean, this is a lot of balls in the air, a lot of juggling here to do, even though it's all kind of centered around, education and track and cross country, there's still a lot going on here.
I never wanted to leave. I
Hmm.
I love Highlands. I love this place. It can drive you crazy, as I'm sure any institution can. The town, everything, things can just drive you crazy here a little
Hmm.
bit.
Hmm.
But I love the area. I love the people. I feel like this is my home, and I tell people I bleed purple,
Hmm.
and so I was committed to what I was doing, and we were pretty successful. In the '90s, we went to nationals 3 times. We were in the top 10 in
Yeah.
the nation in cross a couple times. I'm going to brag a little bit. We're still, I think, the only team, and we've done it twice, to be in the top 10 in cross country without having a track team. And
Wow.
we did that a couple times. Had some All-Americans, and so I enjoyed that success. And then you know, so it wasn't really difficult. We didn't have track in the spring with the men. We just trained, and cross country guys and women are pretty committed for the most part. And so it's not like I had to be present to every training session.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't as difficult as it might sound, saying
Well,
we did this, that.
but there's a lot of other things that go into it. Training is one aspect, an important aspect. There's scheduling, there's budget, and again, we're talking about cross country, so less, you don't have a
Yeah.
lot of, you're not equipment intensive and things like that. There's recruiting. I mean, how did you handle all that aspect of it? You still had to recruit a
Yeah.
team to be there.
Yeah. So I was fortunate to have a lot of friends, in the high school ranks, and um, be able to get people, just say, hey, if you got a kid that wants to run, send him.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give them a little bit of money, and we didn't have much scholarship money. Um, I Another funny whatever. I didn't have an office at Highlands at all, for several years. Do you remember Otter Pops by any chance? The little frozen like popsicles.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Of course,
So
you buy them in like a bulk of like 100, right? Talking about those? Yeah,
yep,
yeah, yeah,
yep,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I had a big Otter Pop box that was full of file folders, and that was my office. And whatever vehicle I happened to be driving around in, it would be right next
That's
to me.
where it was. Yeah.
And the reason the Otter Pop box, if you remember, they were very, very sturdy.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, they were leak proof. They didn't break. And yeah, I guess I could have had a actual file system or something, but that Otter Pop box was my office for many years.
So what was it like? You start transitioning into full time now, and
Uh-huh.
adding a track team to it, right?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, that's a whole different. I mean, building a track program from scratch is,
Um,
I mean, very challenging. What were some of the first
very
things you had to tackle?
well with recruiting, right? So they didn't give us much money, and so I'm trying to recruit some track kids, and
Mhm.
it's not an easy sell. We don't have a track. I mean, we have
Mhm.
at that point we didn't have a track. We built one. I used to love the old cinder track
Hmm.
We had a single track for years and years. It was so nice to train distance kids on.
Mhm.
But they built a track, so then we finally had a track. And I would tell you that the first recruit, she recruited herself. Her name was Stephanie Butts, and she's now Stephanie Davies. She's down in Albuquerque. She's a highly successful coach and mostly cheerleading coach, but still very successful.
Mhm.
I got a letter from her, and she was the first girl that I kind of recruited, along with, well, I'll take that back. The very first girl was a state champion pole vaulter, and we didn't have any pole vault equipment, but I promised her we'd get whatever was the state of the art pole vault equipment. We'd get it and be ready to go. She didn't know that I really didn't know how to coach the pole vault, but I was going to learn. And so she was the very first recruit. But then this other young lady came to us, and she's one of these kids that was not really good at anything, but okay at a lot of things. And so I made her a multi. And we got another girl that came in and was kind of the same, kind of a decent athlete, but she wasn't going to score points in anything as an individual event. But so we had two multis.
Hmm.
And we went to conference the second year, and I noticed that there was only 8 entrants, or only 6 entrants at this point in the multi. And I said, this was outdoor. I said, the heptathlon. I said, all right. So we entered the heptathlon, and we got 6th and 7th.
Mhm.
And I was so excited. I said, we're going to be a multi-school. And I don't know if you know anything about us. We've had 6 different people go to become All-Americans in the multi. We've had national champions in the multi. One of our multis just got in the Hall of Fame last year, Celsius Slack. So for about a decade, we were very, very successful, and I think known as a jumps and multi program.
Now
But
that kind of flies in the face of, from a person outside looking at it, new program, no facilities, equipment, things like that. It's like, okay, we're gonna, we've got distance down because we have that history. We're just gonna add sprints and jumpers to start out with, or no one says I'm gonna go do throws first because I don't have a hammer cage and the implements,
right.
things like that. You went for the hardest one, the one that does all of them: throws, jumps, hurdles, everything. You said
It was
we're going to go tackle the multis first.
it was just out of necessity. I wanted to score some points,
Mhm.
and so that was it. I needed to
Huh.
score some points, and that was like an event. I said we could score some points there, and at that time there was only 8 teams. So if we put together a relay team, we're going to score a point there,
Mhm.
just get it around, and so that was the beginning of it.
Hmm.
And then also, the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference is, if it's not the toughest, it might be the
Oh,
second, but
it,
I consider it the toughest distance
for,
conference in the
for
country.
sure. And I was going to ask, because that's Division II. When did you switch NAIA to Division II?
Right when we 92.
Oh, okay.
My first year was our first year in NCAA.
Oh, okay. So that was,
And
I was thinking
yeah,
maybe it was around 06, 08 or something around there, but no, so you'd been in the
no,
Division II ranks for a
yeah,
while. Okay. All right.
for a
Yeah.
long
And,
time.
and yeah,
Yeah, in
you're,
fact, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, for those who don't know, because the Rocky Mountain, the RMAC, name some of the teams in there, because I know people know the teams that are in that conference.
Yeah, Adam State,
Mhm.
Colorado School of Mines, Western
Mhm.
State. Those are teams that are winning the national championships year in and year
Mhm.
out in cross, and winning the distance races, or putting
Mhm.
multiple All-Americans in the distance races.
Right.
So it's been very, very tough.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I'm really proud of the success we've had in the distances. But when we started track, um, uh, I realized it didn't matter how much money I poured into the distances. I love the distances. My heart is in the distances.
Mm.
But it didn't matter how much money I poured into the distances. Like, I have a girl right now that, and this has been the same thing for 15 years, right? I have a girl right now who broke our school record in the 5K by 15 seconds, and she ran under 17:30, which to me is pretty darn good.
Super solid, right?
20th in our conference. 20th. So
Oh
so
my.
if I go out and get a 17 flat 5K girl, she might score me a point at conference.
Right.
She might get to the national, but I made a executive decision that we were going to elevate the jumps, sprints, and multis. And in our conference, in the RMAC conference, the jumps and sprints, I had a girl get third, maybe my third year in the 100, and she ran like 12.3.
Mm-hmm.
Which is okay. I would take a 12.3 girl, but
Mm-hmm.
she's not going to get third in anybody's conference these days,
Right.
right? And I had a champion in the long jump who jumped 590, which is good, still a decent jump. But in recent years, if you didn't jump over 6, you weren't getting on the podium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put a emphasis on the sprints and hurdles and multis, and we became pretty successful. We've won a couple of trophies at nationals. We've been in the
Yeah.
top 10 for times, and we've had 14 national champions in the jumps and multis.
Well, I think that
And
says
so,
a lot about you, Bob. Some of us, what we know is what we know, right? So we pigeonhole ourselves. We're distance coaches, we're throws coaches, etc. And no matter where I go to coach, hell or high water, we're going to be a distance school, or we're going to be a throw, whatever,
yeah,
I
yeah,
put myself into. So for you to take a step back and say, okay, like I'm a distance guy. I love distance. That's my, that's my DNA. But in the situation we're in today, that's not the most prudent decision for us to make. So I
yep.
still want us to be the best. Okay, so then we're going to pour money and attention over here into these events and this event.
That's
That says a lot
and
about
that's
your
that,
character.
that's exactly I mean, that's the decision I made, right? And I put together a little plan. My athletic director at the time, Ed Manzanares, who's now down at UNM, he's an associate AD down there. I invited him to lunch at the golf course here. We have a little 9-hole golf course, and they had a restaurant. And I again, I don't throw anything away. I still have the plan, and it said Cowgirl Track and Field Conference Champs 2013, I think, right? And it was only about 5 or 6 pages, but it was a plan for how we were going to be conference champs in 2013.
Hmm.
Well, I crossed that out, and I think I put 2014 on it. And and of course, one of the things was, hey, I need some scholarship money. I need to
Mm-hmm.
recruit better athletes. And he was very helpful. He really, I he believed in it. Nobody else believed in it. When we started track and field, I don't think anybody thought that we were going to be winning trophies at the national championships. I don't
Right.
think anybody thought that we were going to be beating Adams State for a conference championship. You
Wow.
know, there were my assistant coach at the time, Patrick Johnson, my wife, myself, and then Ed. I think there were 3 or 4 people that
Hmm.
believed we could do something, and and we've we've done okay.
You mentioned Patrick, the assistant coach back then. That's another thing that comes along with adding a program, and and especially specifically a track program, is now hiring, going out and finding assistant coaches. So we talked about recruiting to Las Vegas, New Mexico, there at Highlands. What about staffing? How have you handled that through this growth period?
Yeah, so we're still one of the more understaffed. I got one full-time assistant, and then I have a GA and a volunteer. I have a volunteer throws coach who he's quit on me a few times. Uh, just walked off, but I always manage to get him back, and he's a tremendous help through the program. His name's Howard Dunbar. I'm not looking forward to him retiring.
Hmm.
Uh, but he volunteers. He does a great job with our throws, and then I've just had to replace one, and all of my former coaches have gone on to be pretty successful, either as coach or in some other profession, and that's what I encourage is my coaches to. I give them a lot of leeway. I give them a lot of freedom. If I hire you to be my sprints and say sprints and hurdles or jumps. I mean, I love coaching the jumps, right? Um, but I'm not going to interfere unless I see something that I think is totally wrong, right? I'm
Hmm.
not.
Hmm.
I, I might drive home and say, gosh, we should be doing this, but it's your baby,
Hmm.
and show me results. And I've been lucky that the people that I've brought in for the most part have produced results, but it's been one at a time. Patrick moved on and went and coached a professional group for a while. Um, I brought in a friend of yours, Molly.
Yep.
Molly was here, and she was outstanding.
Hmm.
I just couldn't keep her here. She had a lot of ties back in the
Yeah.
Midwest, and
Yeah.
and then she went on and very successful as a coach at a couple of different places back home.
Hmm.
And then the coach that came in after that, she's now the associate head coach at Georgetown.
Wow.
And my most recent coach is coaching at another D1. So I encourage coaches to grow and find a better job. That's really why you're here, and you're going to find a better. You're not going to find a better job if your team sucks, right?
Yeah.
Generally,
Yeah. It's a lot tougher, that's for sure. Well, let me ask you,
sure.
Bob.
So
I
yeah,
love that. I love that attitude. That's an attitude of, first of all, selflessness. Of, hey, I love to have you here. That's why I hired here. But I want you to grow, and if that means going back home, or growing to, air quotes here, a bigger institution, those kind of things. It's also an abundance mindset from you as well. Scarcity mindset says, no, I want to keep this coach here as long as possible.
yeah.
I know it'd be better for them to go back home, but you know what? That's not better for me, my team, right?
Right,
So you
right,
have an
right.
abundance of like, okay, I'll find the next one, and I'll grow that person, etc. What's your? I'm curious of your, like, advice, or what else you can share for coaches that are looking to interview other places. So assistant coaches, they're interviewing with other head coaches, because that seems extremely valuable. I
Yeah.
personally, and I've had that with some former head coaches when I was coaching as well, that really blessing. Like, I remember when I left Ball State to go to Mississippi State, and Sue Parks, one of the love her, tough person. I mean,
Mhm.
she's a man, she's tough. And
Yeah.
even as tough as she was on me as an assistant coach, when she found out that I had gotten the job at Mississippi State, which was my whole career goal, was to go to the SEC, she was the first person to say, hey, congratulations. I know you've really wanted this. I put her in a lurch,
Right.
right? It was during summer, so now she's got to go find another assistant, things like that. And she's cross country, so she's right in the thick of summer training, going in the fall. It was terrible for her. No good timing for
Right.
her at all. And she still was like, I'm extremely happy for you. Like, I know that's what you want. And that to me set everything up for how I think about Sue Park. She's just an amazing human being for that alone. That's an abundance mindset of like, bless you. We'll go find another one. We'll be okay. Go do it. What advice or experience can you share for assistant coaches that are interviewing with other head coaches? How do you find that person? How do you find that Sue Parks? How do you find that Bob DeVries? Someone who's going to be, hey, I want you here as long as possible. That's why
Hmm.
we're interviewing and maybe, and hiring you or whatnot. But if there's something better, whether that, and you get to describe what better is, whether it's, better is back home, better is at your alma mater, better is it more money, whatever better might be. How do you suss that out when you're interviewing? Because, it's a very stressful situation when you're interviewing for a job. You are also interviewing that head coach. How do you
Yeah.
suss that out?
Yeah.
What advice can you give there?
Yeah. So, for me, I don't want to know all the details of your training philosophy. I mean, I want to know more about you as a person and the relationships you have with athletes, and tell me a story about, connection that you made. Because I what so I want to know how you do that, how you build connections, and how you show athletes that you care about them. Um, because if our training philosophies don't mesh, and that maybe comes a little bit further down, but we can work on that. And I don't have an ego. Well, I no, that's not true. I have an ego,
Mhm.
but but I know that there's many different ways to train champions, right? If there was only one way, somebody would have figured it out and they'd be training every single champion. But there's a lot of different ways to train. And I would tell you, like right now, we had great results at our conference meet and with our 400 runners. I don't necessarily, if I was specifically training our 400 runners, we'd probably train them a little bit differently than my current assistant, Coach Russell. But he gets good results, and that's great. So we'll work that out. But I need to know that you can make connections with a diverse population of athletes. You can let them know you care. Because I always feel, and people say, like, I've had a lot of international athletes and a lot of coaches say, how do you deal with them? And I said, well, if they know that you care about them first as a person, and then you want them to succeed as a student, and you can provide some value to them as a coach too, right? You're competent in what you provide. Those things fall in line. So I want to feel that from people that I interview, that you're going to be able to create a connection. You're not going to be just a straight X's and O. This is what we're doing. Anybody can write up a great training plan, right? I can go online and find Clyde Hart's 400 program and throw it on the board. Let's go do it. But getting people to believe and commit to it, that's what I want to feel from somebody that's going to work with me.
That's interesting. We're in the midst of hiring a couple of positions here, and we talk in the same way of, we can teach how to sell and, the blocking and tackling, how to put quotes in and orders and things like that. But it's hard, it may be impossible, I don't know, to teach a cultural fit, someone who, has the same belief systems and thoughts towards our customers, like hire for that. And then we can train the rest,
Yep.
That's what it sounds like you're kind of describing there.
That's very true. I mean, and there's not a ton of people clamoring to come to Las Vegas, New Mexico either. So but it has to be, and you've got to understand that when you come here, it's not an easy place necessarily to live if you're not from here. I'm not because the people are mean or anything like that. Just it's isolated. It's different. There's not a nightlife, so it's you got to flesh out those things specifically to here. But I think anywhere you are, just like you said, that connection, that commitment, the relationship building, that's what grows teams, grows organizations, in my mind.
I wonder, you talk about during your interviewing process, I don't want to see your training philosophy. You may discuss it, but it's like, oh, okay, if I'm going to trust you, I'm going to trust you. I want to know how you connect with people, things like that. I wonder, because I've heard of both sides of that type of interview, right? One is, I want to know you and how you react and connect with people, specifically young people, right? I had the athletic director of Iowa State on the podcast, and I asked him, I was like, hey, you hire and fire lots of track coach, you've done this a lot. What do you look for? And he goes, well, you got to know your X's and O's. He goes, that's just table stakes. So let's put that to the side. Right. He goes, at the end of the day, he goes, in sports and specifically track and field, it's a people person job. He goes, so not only are you working on the college level, 18 to 22-year-olds, but you've got to work with the academic advisors. You've got to work with the SIDs. You've got to work with administration, faculty, et cetera. So if you can't work with people, it almost doesn't matter if you can do the X's and O's point or not. You can't do the job. So I wonder, because I've heard the other side of the interview where someone wants you to bring in a binder of your training. I want to talk about how are you going to train the throwers or whatever event, and let's go over that. I wonder how many, I'm going to say successes occur. And what I mean by successes is not necessarily how many champions are produced on the track, but how long do those partnerships last? Is that a coach who came in because they were hired because of their X's and O's? Do they last at that university 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or 10 years, or vice versa? Someone who comes in, it's like, oh yeah, this person's a cultural fit. These kids will believe in this person, more than anything. Does that person last 1 or 2 years or 10 years? Yeah. I'm just curious on that, on the initial hiring process, which one creates more success in that vein?
When I look around our conference, we have some really good coaches that have been here a while, but I also pay attention to the assistant coaches. And I think that there's a lot more turnover when somebody's brought in simply because they coached a couple All-Americans at another school or and they don't pay attention to that relationship and that, that commitment to the caring. and getting people to believe. And I mean, I'm not at their practices or, in their
Hmm.
team meetings, but I see the way people interact. And I love when I see coaches who show enthusiasm and are able to communicate that to their athletes. And those are the ones that I see most successful, in our conference,
Hmm.
in terms of assistant coaches. And I love seeing that. That's I love being around young coaches who show that enthusiasm. It keeps me. I think I'm enthusiastic, but I really appreciate that about younger coaches. Be enthusiastic about what you do. Communicate that to your athletes.
And it seems like in your conference, and not knowing specifics, so you correct me where appropriate here, at least on the head coaching side, you got a pretty long tenure head coaches there in the conference, right?
Yeah, I'm by far the longest. Damon Martin at Adams has been here since the mid
Okay,
'90s.
so I knew Damon had been there, right?
Yeah, Jen Michael and Lindsay have been there a while at Westerns.
Right,
Some of the coaches are younger, but I feel like we got Matt Sparks has done amazing things at Colorado School of Mines.
right.
Ross Fellows at UCCS. And these
Yep.
are guys who've been around. Ross grew up in the Ross, who's the coach at UCCS, grew up, of course, in the RMAC. He was an
Right.
athlete at Kearney and coached at Kearney, and then so there's a lot of these, even Sparks. Sparks came from Gunnison, went to school in California, but he coached at Shadron, and
Hmm.
so I feel like we've got a great. I call them young guys. They're in their 30s, but to me they're young guys, young
Yeah.
kids, but they're solid coaches, man. I'd put our
Yeah.
conference coaches up against anybody
Yeah.
in
A hundred
terms of
percent.
you know yeah. I feel blessed to be able to hang out with those guys
Mhm.
and ladies, and see them work,
Yeah.
and compete against them.
And take it a next sphere out. I have been able to, yeah, I came from typically coaching Division 1 for my coaching career, so that's where most of my mind space and stuff had been. And then here for the past 4-5 years, I've attended the D2 national championships, and I've really enjoyed that because I mean, it's an eye opener for someone who thinks it's, whether you're on the recruiting side and you think D1 or bust, or if you're on the coaching profession side and you think, well, if I'm not a Division 1 coach, I'm not really coaching. Dude,
Yeah,
that Division 2 meet.
right.
Oh
It's crazy.
my, it's crazy.
It's crazy deep in all the events. The distances are unbelievably deep, but it's just gotten so strong across the board. People sell Division 2 short sometimes, but we have athletes, man. We have athletes, and we've got great coaches. We've got
Mhm.
we've got great coaches in Division 2. People that
Yes.
know what the heck they're doing. I I say I'm more I'm like the head cheerleader. I don't know. I I don't I don't belong in the class with some of those guys.
Stop. uh you do, first of all. Second of
Thank you.
all, it is amazing. I think you nailed it when you talk about Division 2, when you said deep, the depth of it, because it go back 10-20 years to get eighth place in any of the events at nationals still had to be good. I'm not taking away from
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
who ever got it. Like, you still had to coach your butt off to get someone to be eighth place.
sure.
Now when you look at eighth place, it's like, oh my, like,
Yep,
I would absolutely love to have that person on my, like, that person would be amazing on my team. Like,
good.
and there's no event. I don't know if it used to be, where like maybe the multis were like, it's kind of it's not very good there overall, compared to like the distance or something like that. But now every event, your
Oh yeah,
athletes are amazing. Your 10K people, your hammer, your
yeah,
sprints right now are on
mm,
fire.
yep,
the
yep.
top the top level on the 100 and 200 right now is just wacko. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
no,
an
it
amazing meet.
is. It is, and I've been lucky enough to be kind of here the whole time, right through the whole journey, and
Yeah,
and
right.
and, and see it, and it blows me away. It really does. I had my first really outstanding athlete, Angela Graham. She was a 10-time All-American for us,
Dude.
and her marks. she'd be lucky to sneak into some finals. This,
Right. Yeah.
these days with her best marks.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It's
and
phenomenal. I think it really is the epitome of what coaching has become. I think the profession of coaches continue to rise. I mean,
yeah,
if you go right in the middle at 50%, the 50% coach is 100 times better than they were 20 years ago, the 50% coach back then. I mean, it is the
yeah,
level. And I think a lot of that is coaching education. I think a lot of that is
uh-huh,
communication. So from
yeah,
social media to emails, of like just being able to have that peer to peer,
yeah,
what I call peer-to-peer coaching education, which I think is just as important. It's much easier to get in touch with you and a Damon and a JB today
sure,
than it was back in the 90s, and
yeah,
to ask them what
yeah,
you're doing and why you're doing it and things like that. We certainly
yeah.
didn't have a podcast like this back in the
No,
90s to be able
no.
to explore what different opportunities are out there.
There's so much information out there now, and it's you talk about podcasts. For me, it's paralyzing because there's so much out there.
Oh, sure.
If I'm going to go look at I'm going to find a podcast on. Well, I'll give you an example. Not X's and O's, but we've had some athletes struggle with mental health,
Hmm.
and our community is small. And one of the suggestions I say is, there are a lot of podcasts that deal with athletes and performance and
Hmm.
mental health. And my gosh, you know, there's 100.
Hmm.
There's probably more than 100. There's probably, I don't know. I ended up giving our kids a list of 10 or 15, and I
Yeah.
said I can't recommend one. You have to listen and find somebody, a voice that connects to you, or
Mm-hmm.
that resonates with you, and so, but that information, as a specific example, is not available even just a few years ago.
Right. Yeah.
And now with everything else, yeah, if if I need to figure out how to coach my 800 runners, man, I can get a hold of Matt Morris up at Pueblo and say, hey, man, give me a couple of workouts.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up about podcasts with like mental health for your athletes. I think if you're listening and you have not thought about that's a nugget of an information right there. What I learned when I was coaching, and I think, every teacher learns this during their education as they start teaching is, kids in that example, learn in different ways. Some need to read it, some need to hear it, some need to see it, some need to physically feel it, drills and things like that. And so why I have become so passionate about podcasting is I believe that there are people out there that need to hear the information versus you hear
Yeah,
people all the time. Well, I'm not a reader. It's like, great. Then all you gotta do is put your earbuds in and you can hear it. Then you don't have to worry about reading it. You can do it on the airplane or passenger seat of the van or the bus going to a meet, etc. So I love that you're using the podcast medium in other ways, and in this specific example of mental health. That's really awesome. I love hearing that.
yeah. And I know that a few of our athletes have definitely used it. So,
That's cool.
yeah,
That's what I love
yeah,
about, specifically track podcasts. We're a very unique aspect here in the Connections podcast, long form, an hour and a half to 2 hours, no X's and O's. We talk about the journey of the coach. And then there are other great podcasts out there for track that do go into X's and O's. Sprinters Compendium had one for a long time that did real well. Altius did one, or Altus did one. On Track does a really good one with a bunch of unique and has athletes on there, things like that. I think there is space for each and every one of them, of
yeah,
those types of different, track is so diverse from not only
yeah,
the events and the people and
yeah,
ages and stages and things like that,
yeah,
that I think
yeah,
there's so much great content out there. And I love that people are able to do that and give value to others who end up listening to those podcasts.
yep. Absolutely, absolutely. And
I love it.
yep.
Well, for this podcast, Bob, why don't you wrap us up as you look at, by the time you're listening to this, we're probably at National. So we're at Colorado State Pueblo. Beautiful facility, by the way. I went and did
Yeah,
the site visit this past December in addition to the USTF CCCA convention, and really was blown away. Like, I'm super excited about that facility, just the bowl and the football, the stadium aspect of it. What a great scenery. Mountains, of course, is, and you're a mountain guy, so you love it, of course, up there.
yep.
So super excited about that. But as you look at whether it's this year, 2023, or you start putting your crystal ball looking at, 2024, 25 in the future, what's got you excited about New Mexico Highlands track and field and cross country program?
Yeah, well, we've got some really good athletes coming in. The way we essentially finished our season now at conference. We have one or two athletes that'll get into nationals. We have but like our relay and a 400 girl that we could take to last chance, but we're a little bit off, right? We're probably a little bit too far off to really make a good run at it. So we've kind of tied a bow a little bit on most of this season, knowing that we have some good people on campus that redshirted, and we've got some good recruits coming in.
Nice.
I'm really excited about our cross country um, season coming up in the fall. I think it's going to be one of our best seasons ever. We've got a multiple time All American and Andrew O'More who's coming back. So I'm excited about that potentiality, with the team, right? I'm excited that there's some movement. We need a new track facility,
Yeah.
and there's been some movement for that. So that's got me going. They're
Awesome.
talking about potentially building an indoor facility for us, which would actually probably, given our weather, would actually probably benefit us more
Yeah,
because
sure.
we're not going to get too many people come to an outdoor meet.
Right, right.
So I'm excited. When I went to cross country nationals, I had three people independently come up and say, "Hey, I hear you're retiring," and I had to tell them I don't know where that rumor got started because I'm not in a hurry to retire. I mean, I could retire tomorrow, but why? Right? I love
Yeah.
what I do. I love what I do. We continue to have some success. I told my wife when I first got the job, there was a coach. I'm not going to say his name, but I said, if I ever get to be that guy that just doesn't care about getting better or making a difference, please tell me to quit.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten there yet.
Good. Yeah,
Gotten there.
you can't retire until we build the Bob DeVries indoor track and field complex,
Oh my
right?
God.
Come on now.
I don't know. Hey, so you can cut this out, but I'm going to tell a story
Please do. We
about,
ain't cutting nothing out. Get
I,
out of
I'm
here.
going to, I'm going to tell a story about Gil. All
Oh,
right. About
uh-oh.
Gil Athletic.
Wait.
I'm going to tell a story about Gil
No,
Athletics.
this is unscripted, so I don't know what he's about to say. All right, let me
Okay.
hear it, Bob.
I'm going to tell a story about Gil Athletics that has made me appreciate uh, Gil. Just appreciate Gil. So we go to nationals in North Carolina in it's got to be 2018 or 17, and I have a really good javelin thrower who is poised to be All American, but she only throws a Gil javelin, and it's a special. And I'm sorry, I don't know the model. It's a special made Gil. We have it shipped out to North Carolina. We get out there, we can't find it. It says it's been received at Johnson C. Smith University, but nobody knows where it is. I literally look for it for a day and a half in every nook and cranny and office. People who signed for it can't find it. And my javelin thrower is despondent.
Sure.
So there's another manufacturer that has a plant there, and they invite my throws coach and the javelin thrower to go up there and take a look. And meanwhile, there's a Gil representative, and you've told me her name before.
Kim
Um,
26. Yeah, I hired her, so I love her.
so she tells me, she comes up to me and she says, she hears about the missing Gil javelin. She tells me, we'll get one. And I tell and he goes, no, they only made like a dozen of them and they sold them all. There's not one to be had anywhere in the country. And I say, I said, good luck, but I know they're all gone. And so they go up to this facility and she picks out a couple of javelins and she comes back and she's frowning and she's not going to be able to throw. And I, the next day, or it might have been the day after, but anyway, there is a brand new Gil javelin waiting for us when we show up at the track in that morning.
Wow.
And my javelin thrower, Sharon Toako, picks up that javelin with the biggest smile on her face. She goes out,
Oh.
she throws a PR and
Oh.
and makes All American. And I was so thankful
Oh
to
man.
Gil for getting that. I don't know where the hell she found that job, but she got it shipped from somewhere overnight, and it got there. And so that was pretty darn awesome customer service. And I don't just think it was customer service. I think she was just a darn good person who wanted
Yes.
succeed. And so I really do. I thank you. I thank her.
Yeah, thank you for telling that story. Kim Matusik is an amazing human being and really fit our culture exactly right. Our slogan, motto, whatnot is empowering coaches with innovative equipment. We're so focused on the coach, and in this case, and we're able to affect athletes because of our love and attitude towards coaches. So
that was very evident. Very
yeah,
evident.
hearing that
Now,
story, that's the proof. I love it.
The end of that story is this: she offered to sell me that javelin at a steep discount. Well, of course, I took it. Right, took that javelin back home.
Absolutely.
And then when I submitted the bill, because I don't know, it was like a $700 javelin, but I didn't spend seven. But when I submitted the bill, I got in big trouble for buying a javelin without prior approval. So somewhere in my personnel file, there's a ding for buying a javelin without prior approval, but it was well worth it. Well worth it.
You get to a certain age and stage, Bob, you get to just do those things like, hey, I know I did. Sorry, let's move on.
So I can move on. So
she got All-American. What are we arguing about here?
Exactly. She got All-American, and we got a hell of a deal on a great job that we still have. So,
I love it.
I do want to reiterate, Mike did not tell me to tell that story. So I threw that in the end because I appreciate what Gil did for us.
Bob, thank you so much, man. I do love hearing that story. We do so much, and sometimes we don't hear back. And so to hear that kind of thing and hear the success of like a PR with it as well, man, that's the cherry on top, man. I'm so grateful you shared that story with us today.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad you shared your time with us. Little behind the scenes here for you listening. This is like our third take to get this done. Mistake on my part. Weather got us last time on take number 2. Yep. Bob, I'm just so grateful you stuck with me, and we eventually got this recorded because, man, that was a lot of laughs, man. That was a lot of fun to hear you share your journey, the stories, the serendipity of it, but also the intentionality of it. Again, serendipity means that a decision had to be made, even though some things came together that were out of your control. You still had to make decisions that affected where your journey and your path took you. And I think when you look back today, and look at from the high school, from your personal high school, the Runner's World coaching all the way up to today with what you're doing with that program, you have affected so many young people in a positive manner. It really is special. That's why we started this podcast, was to show the real positive impact coaches make on young people today. Because out of all the kids that have gone through your programs, 99.999% are not professional track athletes at this point. That's right. That's fair to say. By the way, that's not just New Mexico Highlands. That's any program. 99.99 are not going on to become professional track and field athletes. But more importantly, they are going on to be moms and dads and business owners, bankers, doctors, lawyers, all those kind of things. They are now affecting society in a positive manner. Absolutely. Because of you. Someone out there has, I bet you, just like your son's middle name was after a coach that affected your life, I guarantee you someone out there has a DeVries middle name, or Bob Robert for a first name. I guarantee it because of what you've done for them, the impact that you've made on them, man. I'm just so proud of you and so happy for what you have done for society, not just track. This goes beyond track, for society, man. We're just so grateful for you. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Yeah, you deserve it, my friend. And you deserve hearing this story. Thank you for being here and listening to New Mexico Highlands, the Cowboys and Cowgirls, man. I love it out there. He brought some good vibes when he said Las Vegas. I forgot it was Las Vegas, New Mexico, because I'm a former Las Vegas, Nevada resident. So I was like, wait a minute. Okay. Yeah. I was like, wait, I forgot it. Hold on. But just so happy that you were here to hear his journey, hear his story, and wish him luck. Like I said, we're either right in the middle of Division II or we're just done with Division II Outdoor Nationals. So I'll be looking for you out there, Bob. So thanks for joining us here on the Guild Connections podcast. Join us next week and we'll do it all over again. Have a great week, everybody.